Starting now.
Good afternoon,
Awesome.
and welcome to this afternoon's program brought to you by the Friends of the Westport Center for Senior Activities. I'm Jack Kling, president of the Friends, and today we have a wonderful, exciting guest, a Westporter you'll surely remember, a first select person from before 2000, I believe, Miss Dianne Farrell, who will update us on what's going on in her life. And Dianne, thank you for giving up some of your busy time and for joining us for an hour this afternoon.
Awesome. No, go right ahead, Jack. Absolutely delighted to be with you.
Well, my pleasure. I was going to ask you to start off for some of our more recent Westport arrivals. Tell us about your stint as first select person for 8 years and what you think were some of your most important contributions and success stories. And I know there were many.
Well, thanks for the question. It's nice to, first of all, it's nice to see you again, Jack. And I am thrilled to be here with my sister, Holly. As I always say, she's younger, but more mature than I am. So, but she's doing a fabulous job at the senior center. A shout out to everybody, to Sue Pfister, to the whole team. I miss you guys. And Jack, when you asked me what my, as I look back on 8 wonderful years, I was thinking fondly of Jim Marpy and his decision to step down. And I was also thinking about our dear friend, Gordon Josoloff, who also served for 8 consecutive years. There's so much to look back over. And I have to say, though, that when I think about it, when I'm asked, I'm really proud of the senior center. When I came into office, we didn't own the property. When I came into office, we didn't have, plans or an appropriation for a building. You were there at the outset, Jack. You voted on the RTM. You've been a dedicated and committed Westport citizen who really believed in the value of the senior center. And so that is a huge one. The other is obviously all the work, again, that you and I did as you were on the RTM on the schools. At that point, we were, still in the throes of a significant enrollment increase. We were trying to bring back buildings like the Greens Farm School, Kings Highway, and the redo, although I'm still scratching my head on Coleytown Middle, and obviously, very.
Oh, you missed that, yeah.
Yeah, very disappointed about, all of the mold discoveries and the challenges there. But the town is doing the right thing and making what they need. But, my husband Wynn, of course, known to many, and I had a great walk back in January. We had just a crystal clear blue, cold, but crystal clear blue day. We parked at the Saugatuck Railroad Station. We walked across the railroad bridge, which is always kind of fun and exciting.
Yes,
and then we walked all the way into Longshore and then over to Campo and then back. And it's a wonderful, wonderful walk. I'm sure lots of folks have done it. But there were people on the paddle tennis courts, even though it was, wintertime, but there was no snow at that moment. And just walking by that building, the bathhouse building that we built during those 8 years that I was in office, I thought, this is great. You just look around and, Westport is a phenomenal community. It always was. That's, Holly and I came back because we loved our experience there as kids. And it just gets better and better. So it's been really fun to see, see the town continue to grow and thrive. And it's a wonderful feeling to feel that I had something to do with it. But it wasn't without, all of the really tireless volunteers who were willing to put in the time, the hours, to help with planning, to help, with votes, to help to explain to our fellow citizens why an investment was important. So it was awesome. It was really awesome. And those are just a few of the things that, I remember. And I still do brown bags in my current job.
I love it.
On
Good.
Wednesdays, I am still doing brown bag lunches. So that never ended.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
You'll be happy to know, and I'll move on, that we're still waiting to dredge the river.
I know. I think about that all the time, and I know, because Wynn is still affiliated with the Saugatuck Rowing Club, and you got a question in one of these preset questions about, what do I miss about Westport? Really, the only thing I miss is it's a longer drive from Easton to get to Westport, but our doctors are there, our bank is there, our financial folks are there, and our church is there. and Holly is there. So, we're there. Our pharmacy is there. I mean, you just think about it. So we're there all the time. And I look at the river and I think, oh, golly, where's the Army Corps? That was one that did get away from us. It'll happen eventually with the new infrastructure push that the Biden-Harris administration is focused on. That's one that I hope the town will try to capitalize on in terms of finally getting that dredging done.
I think you'll find it happen, I hope, in the next couple of years. Anyway, so having decided not to run for a third term, what was the lure of getting you to go to Washington, D.C. and government service?
Well, first of all, it was really funny, but again, hearkening back to some of those very long nights that we spent in the auditorium at Town Hall, 8 years was the right amount of time. I was kind of excited to see what the next person would do. And as I say, I'm very grateful to Gordon for all that he contributed to the town, and similarly to Jim for all that he has contributed since Gordon left office. So the lure was, believe it or not, I ran for Congress, as you know, close races.
I have a question later on about.
Of course.
How would your life have changed if you'd won one of those elections? But we'll get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But because I had, had done that, I had obviously established some connections with folks down in Washington. And so after the election in 2006, they had approached me, Chris Dodd, who at that point was the chairman of the banking committee, but others, Nancy Pelosi, Rahm Emanuel, some others who had approached me about service in Washington. And coincidentally, post 9/11, Wynn, my husband, was also being drawn to Washington for the work that he was doing, and so we thought, this would be an interesting opportunity. And I went through the whole process, had to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate and everything else, and ironically, of course, was nominated by President Bush. So I love telling this story to people about my trajectory because it confuses the heck out of everybody. But I thoroughly enjoyed my 4 years of service at the bank, and really liked being in Washington. Really enjoyed the pace, enjoyed maintaining a strong connection to national policy matters, and so I felt very, very fortunate. It was about I think I was sworn in August, so it was a bit of a process. It was about 8 months from the time that the idea was floated to making through all the various hurdles that you have to make through to be appointed and confirmed. But boy, I'll tell you, best decision I could have made. And frankly, I think that in the end, I'm much happier because I still have more of a connection to governance, which was what I loved about my work in Westport. And so by having these experiences working on the administration side of the equation as opposed to the legislative side, it's been extraordinarily rewarding. I think I would have equally as enjoyed being a member of Congress, but I have to say, I have great memories of the experience. I know that I wouldn't be where I am today had I not wanted to, jump into and be part of the national debate. So I think I've gotten the best of everything, and it's really been enjoyable to be in DC.
So when you started at the Exim Bank, was there a steep learning curve, or did it kind of throw you in the water and say, start swimming?
A little of both, but I will tell you, you'll get a kick out of this again in terms of our town government experience. So, these are, I had been on the Board of Finance for 4 years, and then I, of course, had done the town's budgets for, another 8 years. So 12 years but I will tell you right now, the difference between municipal finance and the federal financial system is, like the moon and, Earth. I mean, it's insanity down there. You watch the debates, But here's what was really interesting. The very first board meeting we had, we get a book and they give us these transactions and the board has to vote. And, you're a bank, so you're making determinations about the project risk. What are the benefits, since these are U.S., government dollars that would be providing a loan guarantee, for a project on behalf of whatever the procurement is that has to do with a U.S. company. And so they have the first meeting. And they say, now that we'll have an adoption of the minutes. And there are only 5 of us on this board. Very formal. We have this huge, huge room. We're sitting very august. and they go to each board member to vote. And I said, Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid I'll have to recuse because I was not on the board, didn't serve on the board. No one had any clue that that would be the appropriate thing to do because of Robert's rules. And I thought to myself, after 12 years of living under Robert's rules and respecting and understanding how the process should run in a public hearing. So anyway, so I made a great first impression with my fellow board members. But the projects are always fascinating, and once you got the hang of understanding how the financing works, it's complicated. There's working capital for small businesses to, where you make an investment. There's, loan insurance, where they pay a premium. And then there's literally putting the imprimatur of the United States government, U.S. Treasury, behind a loan in order for a project to go forward. And, we would do nuclear power, for example. Those are 18 to 20-year tenors. So you really got to think about it. So it was awesome. It was great. And it was a real exposure to a greater understanding of global economic policy, which has served me well as I move forward in my career.
Was it pretty much an apolitical organization, or did?
Very much so. It's a great question. Honest and true. You're exactly right. The other reason I really like the bank, it never felt like it was a partisan effort. We were there to protect the public purse. There were these, and it was private sector focused. So it really wasn't to do with, a particular administration's philosophy, although we can get into climate later because there were issues there. And I, of course, worked for 2 years under President Bush and then 2 years under President Obama. So there was a change in terms of where the focus and the priorities were, but in terms of just literally the dollars and cents, nuts and bolts, didn't matter. And so you're right, it didn't have the same kind of political push-pull that other boards or commissions would have. You're on mute, Jack. Okay.
Nina, you have.
I don't know where I ended, but I just, if you want to go back on. Are we off mute? I think Jack is still on mute.
No, I'm off.
You're recording. Great. Go ahead.
But to your point, you're absolutely right, Jack. When it's money, it's a very nonpartisan issue. When it's the public purse and we're talking about risk and making investments. So I don't recall in 4 years on that board, there was never any kind of acrimony between board members. We occasionally would get into some areas that would result in some, public protest. For example, a coal-powered plant in South Africa that was controversial. Clean burning coal, but nevertheless, obviously there were groups who felt negatively toward that. We had a steel case at one point that was a challenge. I had to go down to Peru actually to look at a liquid natural gas plant where there were concerns about environmental issues, but we worked it out. But the bank was an incredible experience, and it really enabled me to develop my foreign policy and to really understand foreign economics at a much deeper level than I had before I got to Washington, D.C. But I'm telling you now, I used my Westport training at every juncture. In fact, I had one story. I'm in Peru. I'm literally with their finance minister, a woman, which was great. It was good to see that at the time. And she's complaining to me about how the government had promised to decentralize a lot of their funding in order to allow cities and towns to determine how they wanted to spend what were, in fact, excess dollars coming out of some of the extraction industries that were occurring at that moment in time, particularly. And it was really interesting because she said she had a lot of disagreements with the local municipalities. In one case, there was a town that wanted to build a soccer stadium that would be larger than the entire town's population, but it meant something to the town. So she's going on and on, telling me about giving me all these instances, kind of taking a dig at municipal officials. So my, of course, municipal official comes right out. I put my hand on her arm and I said, I understand completely, but let me just, and what she was saying was they were choosing to do these things over electrification. And I put my hand on her. I said, let me just give you a suggestion. I'm a former mayor. People don't understand first selectman down in Peru.
Right.
I said, I'm a former mayor. And I just want to tell you that what you say to them is, you have the money for electrification, which you got to do first. And we'll also give you the stadium. And she just kind of looked at me, and was kind of surprised that I was taking up for the local, villages and towns. But it was that kind of mentality that I brought with me to those decisions that was unique and extraordinarily helpful.
Great. And I'm going to ask you some other examples as we go through the afternoon.
Sure.
So, we're happy to hear good stories and anecdotes. So how do we segue from XM initials to ITA initials in alphabet soup down in Washington?
I know. Oh, golly. It's so bad. And we have a new, secretary, the former Rhode Island governor, Gina Raimondo, who is phenomenal. She's absolutely wonderful. But, we're translating constantly what these dopey acronyms, represent. And, you have acronyms that count for 3 or 4 things. It's like you got to know which department is using an acronym in a certain way because it's not universal. But how did it happen with ITA? Well, what happened was when my 4-year term at XM Bank ended, and don't forget, I followed in the footsteps of Julie Balaga, another wonderful, Westport resident.
Oh, legend.
And Julie and I would speak periodically when I was down in DC in the office. So what happened was at the end of my 4-year term, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce contacted me and said that they've known of my work, especially on India, and they wondered if I would be willing to come over and help to run the U.S. India Business Council at the Chamber. And the Chamber is almost across the street from the bank, and everything has a view to the White House. I've never worked in a building where I haven't had a view to the White House. I've been in 3 buildings in Washington, and I've literally just gone around the block. It's the craziest thing. And I was very interested because India had become a very passionate project for me. There were tremendous opportunities. We were selling a ton of Boeing aircraft, the 737 787, some 737 as well.
We won't discuss that anymore.
I know. But we did $5 billion worth of, aircraft sales to Air India. We had tremendous oil and gas opportunities in India as well. So I had done a lot. And so the chamber had noted this and they recruited me to come over. So I did that, exclusively did India for about 4.5 years. But through that, the trade community, even in Washington, D.C., is not a very large community for a host of different reasons. But you get very connected to your State Department counterparts, your White House counterparts, your Commerce Department counterparts, as well as some of the smaller agencies. And so I was enjoying that very much. And then a colleague, a former board member of my chamber job, had become the assistant secretary under the Obama administration at the International Trade Administration, which is part of the Department of Commerce. And he asked me to come over and interview. Now, the interesting thing there is that's a career position, not a political appointment.
Career civil servant, they were GS something.
Correct. Well, actually SES, Senior Executive Service, but it's part of it's at the end of the GS system. Exactly. And so I interviewed, and I wasn't in a rush to make any changes necessarily, but I did like the idea that I was coming back into government. To your point about, how it feels. There's just you're closer to feeling like you're really doing public service. And so I took over the Asia portfolio. I was the deputy assistant secretary for Asia, which meant that I had all of Southeast Asia, South Asia, everything except for China. There's a separate deputy assistant secretary for China. So you name it, from India, Pakistan, all the way to Australia, New Zealand, and all of Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, you name it. That was my portfolio. And I did that for about 5.5 years. And then I hear a telephone ringing.
Yeah, it's a house phone. Wait a minute.
Okay. All righty, there we go. But Jack is still on mute, just a notation there. So,
can you not hear me?
no, I hear you perfectly. Oh, okay, good.
Oh, I can't. I'm saying I'm off mute even while you're talking. So.
Okay, no worries. No, I think it may be me not understanding the system. But in any event, so that's how I ended up at Commerce, was starting to do the Asia portfolio. And then, as I say, 5 years later, I'm now the Deputy Undersecretary. So I now have responsibility for the entire globe, not just the Asia portfolio.
Good, because that gets me asked a lot of good questions. And I'm going to kind of go out of sequence since you brought up India and 4.5 years. We spent 3 weeks there a couple of years ago. I found it a fascinating country. It was like the best of times and the worst of times, the high standard of living and the lowest standard of living.
Yep.
What are some of your takeaways from the India experience as a visitor, as a worked there and consulted there?
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience. What I have observed is that people either go to India and they will only go once in their life because it just didn't click with them, and there are a lot of tragic human hardships that people witness, and they either are comfortable or not comfortable in that kind of an environment. India, for me, India is an extraordinary place. It is a paradox, as you just described, where you have some of the richest people in the world and you have the highest concentration of abject poverty anywhere. And you have a system, as we see right now, since India has now broken the global record for largest number of daily reported cases, and the death rate is going up, and Delhi is now in lockdown again, and they're in a very challenging place. So that it's a paradox. That's what you see. What I saw immediately, and what I continue to see, and I have many, many close associations with my government counterparts, but industry counterparts as well. It is a thriving democracy. It's, because of that, there isn't the level of control that the Chinese have, for example. The way I describe India to people, because until you've been in a country where you are with a population size that is unimaginable when you live in a place like the United States or in Europe, you really have to have empathy for how there can be any structure. And so what I always say to people is that India is China because of its size and challenges, but with color. Okay. Because, as you know, if you've been there, people can have nothing, but they have energy. They are dedicated to family. They're always colorful in one manner or another. And they are some of the warmest people you will ever meet in your life. And so having gotten to know that culture well, I really felt a strong draw. And that was why I was happy to go to the chamber to dig down deeper and to see how we can work together. And from a strategic standpoint, and as we're very fond of saying, America may be the oldest democracy in the world. India is the largest democracy in the world. And India is only 50, I think it's 54, maybe we're coming up on 55 years.
48,
correct.
49, 50.
Correct. Yeah. So we have a lot of reasons to feel a connection. And frankly, also in the United States, the India diaspora is an incredible community of Indian Americans who have done amazing things. You have only to look at leadership in Silicon Valley as an example. But it goes far beyond that. I mean, if you look at the field of medicine, if you look at so many different areas. So India is very special and very important to me personally. And one of my goals has been to keep India as a high profile as I have opportunities to influence senior government officials. Because here's the flip side. India is a very difficult place at times to do work or to see your way past the chaos. And so we have companies, and since my job for 5 years was working with US companies and Indian companies alike, a lot of my job was to see if we can't try to get the Indian government to embrace a more open, system of free trade. So that's been a lot of my focus and priority. And India is it's a very, very special place to me. Mother India, as we describe it, as they describe it.
A quick comment, and then I've got another question about India for you. I think it was 2 years ago, the Staples valedictorian and salutatorian were twin sisters of Indian, first generation Indian in this country. That amazing story, and they were lovely ladies.
Yep.
They similarly beautiful. Mr. Modi.
Yes, the PM, as we finally call him. I've met him several times. Yeah.
How do I read him and his policies, which seem to be, if nothing else, contradictory at times between financial and social?
So he's a very strong prime minister. He's bucked the tide in terms of his election successes. They serve prime ministers serve 6 years, or elections come every 6 years, and Indian politics are as interesting to watch, frankly, as American politics are. The way I would describe Narendra Modi is he is very single of purpose. He has dedicated his life to public service. He has no children. He had a child wedding. It's completely irrelevant. But he was, the chief minister of the state of Gujarat, and many Indian Americans actually come from the state of Gujarat that are here in the United States. He is definitely a very, very smart politician, and he recognizes trends, and he knows how to ride those waves. I believe he is a man of conviction. I believe that he has the good of the country in his heart. He wants to be remembered. He wants to lead and be remembered as a father of India, the way other extremely notable leaders have been. He is leaning heavily toward the Hindu religion as it's permeating into some of the more democratic processes, and that does concern folks, obviously. I think he feels it sincerely, but he also knows how to, as I say, how to be a successful politician. He clearly wants to bring the country up to a better standard of living across the board. As we've witnessed, and part of the challenge with India is IP protection for companies, pricing fairness, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals or medical devices. It's been a big issue lately. He wants to accelerate India's ascension, and that makes it difficult at times. But he's an extraordinarily impressive man. I mean, he's amazingly charismatic, and he feels deeply. He feels deeply for every Indian citizen, and he comes from humble beginnings. So he's been very successful. He's in a very challenging moment right now, because this is the biggest challenge that India has faced as a society in a very, very, very long time, and we have to see how he comes through it. I saw him yesterday. He was on the news because he was part of the President Biden's climate change summit yesterday. And that is important because India and China are huge polluters when it comes to inefficient coal plants. But, there's a resentment there, because now that the developed world has realized the impacts of global warming, we want the developing countries to immediately modify their behaviors. And I'll never forget, I had an Indian minister say to me on more than one occasion, when I said, sir, we've got these enormous climate challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And he looked at me and he just goes, polluter pays. Yeah. And what he meant by that was, we've enjoyed, through our industrialization, we've enjoyed unfettered opportunities for cheap energy. And to now turn around and suggest that those who are trying to come up don't have those same options, results in resentment, understandably. These are challenges that we're constantly trying to solve. But at any rate, it's an extraordinary place that produces extraordinary people, and we need to keep their democratic processes and commitments alive. But it's not easy, it's complicated. But when we have those discussions, my foreign counterparts will flip the argument on me when we look at some of our challenges. Yeah. Yep.
Last India question, and it's a quickie. Did you get a chance to go to Varanasi?
Yes, in fact, I went to Varanasi. I actually went to, this is part of the problem, the crisis that India is facing now. There's something known as the Kumbh Mela, which is this, happens I think every 6 or so years, but this gathering of millions of worshipers who come to the apex of the Yamuna River, the Varanasi River, and then a ghost river. It doesn't actually exist, but it's part of lore. And Harvard Business School has written a case study on how the city of Allahabad actually makes this happen every so many years. So I went there and then went to Varanasi, got up early, got out on the boat at dawn, and it's quite an experience. I'm assuming that you
saw the funeral,
all the funeral pyres and all the shops that sell the materials for the funeral pyre, and all the cows that are literally walking up the steps and down narrow alleyways as this whole process is unfolding. It is truly, truly extraordinary. And here's the funny part. They have a brand new airport. I'm sure you flew in out of it. I mean, there's the paradox. There's the paradox. You've got, oxen pulling carts, and then you have this brand spanking new airport. That's the paradox of India.
Well, it was our favorite spot, and I agree completely. Okay, let me move on.
And I'm sure you got to Agra. Clearly, you went to the Taj Mahal.
Agra and all the usual suspects, right?
Right.
Picture in front of the whole thing. Sunrise, sunset. Another couple of countries in Asia. Tell me about Vietnam. We spent some time in both South and North Vietnam. I found the South to be still very developed and capitalistic. The North still more agrarian and, if you will, communistic. Is there that same dichotomy going on still today?
Well, Hanoi is very different than Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon. Hanoi is a government town, and it is much more French. It feels much more French. Lots of vestiges of that architecture. So it feels like a government town. For example, when I would go to Vietnam, I'd have to go to both cities because to visit with companies, they're primarily in the South. And, it's like New York and Washington. It's like Mumbai and Delhi. I mean, if you're going to use those illustrations. And so so to me, the way I looked at it was, as I say, Ho Chi Minh City was more industry focused, and Hanoi was more government focused. And in Hanoi, the government is a communist government. I mean, it's different than their neighbor to the north. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still a communist government with a tremendous amount of central power. But they have been very smart about, economic openings that have, of course, made them the beneficiary of companies who, for example, have chosen to move out of China but are staying in Southeast Asia. Vietnam has been a huge beneficiary. They opened up some of their markets. We still have challenges there. You can talk to any of the automotive companies if you have any questions about that. But they've been they've been more progressive, and they've also taken a more not agnostic, but a more they've striven for equality in terms of treatment of, say, Chinese interest versus U.S. interests. For example, both China and the U.S. have deployed an aircraft carrier to do exercises off the Vietnam coast. Now, that's about 6 or 7 years ago. Things have gotten a little dicier in the waters off of Vietnam, and obviously the Taiwan Strait issues. But Vietnam it's an incredibly vibrant place, and they want to be business friendly. They just need we need to continue to work together so that they don't feel as if their industries are being overtaken. The other challenge that we have, and it's not limited to Vietnam, many countries, is data protection. And where we see one large global connection of data transferring everywhere. Some countries, Vietnam is one where global banking as an example, they want to keep the data localized to a degree that makes it difficult from a competition standpoint. So it benefits the state, the state enterprises. But we're getting there, slowly but surely we're getting there. We've done a tremendous amount of aircraft sales and aircraft engine sales to Vietnam as an example.
Really?
But very good, very warm feelings. And I actually stayed. Yeah. Did you stay? Did you stay in Hanoi at the?
Well, the big white hotel was the only.
Yeah.
Big, yes, with a pool back and yes.
Yes, and they take you down to the bomb shelter. They do a bomb shelter tour because that was one of the.
I went to the lake with the
yes,
plane.
where John McCain's plane crashed. Yeah, and the prison, of course, which was actually a French prison. Exactly.
Exactly. Prison first.
But there's tremendous warmth from the Japanese people toward Americans. And remember, not Japanese, excuse me, Vietnamese.
Vietnam.
There's warmth from the Japanese as well. But there's tremendous warmth from the Vietnamese people. And we have to remember they have suffered many, many, many conflicts, including, military conflicts after the American war, as they describe it. So it's a different perspective than we may have when we think about U.S.-Vietnam, historical relations.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that they were very happy with Americans now. It was, we want to get a job, move out of the house with Mama San, make money, get a scooter, get a car, go on vacations. That was Ho Chi Minh City. And that they were basically very pro-American and pro-business, if you will, or economic revival. I also got the impression they were not that friendly with China because their experience over the years, the Chinese were bad, the French were worse. They're kind of over the Americans, is my sense.
I think that's a very good encapsulation. I would have to agree with that. You mentioned the motorbikes. It is positively a Zen experience to try to cross a street. Oh my goodness, it is, and somehow it works. But wow, yeah.
They told us don't make eye contact, just start walking. And don't stop, don't slow down.
Nope, that's right. Just be forthright and it works, but too. But it is interesting because over the years, even I've observed two wheels are turning into four wheels.
Yes, they all aspire to be four-wheel drivers.
Yep.
Okay, the big guy in the block over there, China.
Yeah.
I want to start with kind of a different question on China, and it has to do with tariffs.
Very familiar.
Yes, I'm sure you will. I think many Americans have no conception of how tariffs really work. Who pays the tariff tax? Who ends up paying more for a product? The whole idea of what are tariffs designed to do and how they affect the American companies who are subjected to tariffs. And when they write a check for them, who gets the check? It's a lot of questions.
Well, your timing is everything, as they say. The Biden-Harris administration are at this very moment evaluating the current tariff regime that in large measure has been a consequence of Chinese overproduction and dumping product, notably steel, aluminum as well, but notably steel, and putting our industries literally out of business. And so what happens is it is a complicated economic formula, and frankly, we went into hyperdrive for the last 4 years as the Trump administration found that they could use tariffs for a whole host of different reasons. That one, legitimately was to address national security concerns. If you don't have steel and you don't have certain other products, that leaves us vulnerable as a country when we start talking about our national security interests and our ability to continue to maintain the world's most important defense posture. So we've gone through. So we had, it was Commerce actually who had to do my group who had to do all of the analysis to look at certain key industries to see about U.S. vulnerabilities. Now, where there's criticism is that these things can also be used as geopolitical tools for other purposes. For example, if a country with whom we have a treaty is not living up to their treaty obligations, and I'm talking about a trade agreement, an economic trade agreement, not security, then at times, tariffs have been used as a threat in order to bring that country into alignment to be consistent with their treaty obligations. And so it was used as a negotiating tool in a couple of instances. You ask about how it works. Effectively, the U.S. government determines what the penalty is to U.S. interest, to a U.S. company, if a product comes in at a cheaper price. And then we basically force a tariff on the foreign producer to try to normalize so that we can create a level playing field. As the expression was, fair, fair equal trade. And what would happen, of course, and what does happen is the tariff can start to normalize. In fact, our steel industry has recovered a bit, but it comes at a cost because there are downstream impacts to other industries. If they can't get steel or if the price of steel goes up, it affects them. And, so everything is connected. I mean, nothing is out there on its own.
The American.
And so,
go ahead.
Well, no, but the cost generally will get passed on to the consumer. And that's where the economics of watching carefully about inflation becomes extremely important. But the bottom line is that when you have a country that has to, find employment for a population the size of China, who have absolutely accelerated their economic growth to the level where they have brought their poverty levels down to a very significant and notable amount. The U.S. has to do something. I mean, and its allies. And some of our allies didn't particularly care for some of the decisions that were being made by the current administration, the former administration. And that's why the Biden-Harris team are now looking at where we have tariffs and where we don't. We have a big one coming with the Europeans on June 1st, where things like Jack Daniel's whiskey,
wine and whiskey,
is going to go up exponentially, and it has the potential to do severe harm to our U.S. industry. So it's a constant dance. The U.S. Trade Representative's office, chaired by Ambassador Tai, is our partner in these trade areas, and we do have to do enforcement on this, but USTR really takes the negotiating lead when it comes to having to address these challenges. The Commerce Department does the work, but it's the USTR and the President, the White House, who make the ultimate determinations about how to address some of these challenges.
Okay, so we're looking at the tariff issue, especially the semi-punitive ones. Last question about Asia as a whole. The idea that Obama's administration tried to push a kind of a pan-U.S. Asian economic group didn't pass muster with the unions. Even Hillary was opposed to it, and certainly the Trump administration.
You're talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP.
Right,
yeah.
Now I see Biden's administration is looking at a TPP, but without China. Is that still an active?
Well, China was never in the TPP.
No,
China.
It'll be the same thing.
Right. This was going to be led by the U.S. and Japan.
Right.
This was going to be, and Vietnam was going to be in it. And part of the economic reforms that happened in Vietnam were actually to get ready for TPP. And then, unfortunately, it became a bit of a political hot potato in the 2016 elections, and we know where we are with that. In the meantime, there's something called RCEP, which is this Regional Cooperation Economic Pact that was initiated by China. India was in it for a while, but India, as a very non-aligned oriented country, dropped back. It finally passed. It's not a terribly strong economic agreement, but yes, I think there are certainly people who you know, put a lot of sweat equity into TPP when they were in the Obama administration and working for President Obama and then Vice President Biden, who I think would like to see an agreement come back. But we're right now, as Ambassador Tai has said, they're still in the early days of this administration, and they're not ready to start committing to a lot of free trade agreement negotiations at this moment. They're, you know, still taking a look at the lay of the land, you know, evaluating what the last 4 years have meant in terms of our, you know, overall global relationships, you know, with key allies or in certain regions. So we'll see what comes back, but I guarantee you there are people in the Biden-Harris administration who would hope that somehow in some way another form of TPP will come back. And of course, TPP did go forward, and it just went forward without us.
Without us.
Correct. But there is great hope. The Japanese will always express their hope that at some point the U.S. will come back into it. So stay tuned. It's going to be interesting to watch.
And you'll be involved in that, I gather.
I look forward to it.
Good, me too. Okay, a couple of anecdotal questions. Gee, time is flying, Dianne. This has been very easy. How do you find our country's image changing overseas since you've been involved? And can big business, or has big business done anything to help make it better or make it not quite as good? What trend do you see, and how can big business help?
Well, I will tell you unequivocally, big business has been really, really good in terms of as an ambassador or an extension of the American people overseas. You know, they're creating jobs overseas. They are and therefore they're contributing to the prosperity of a nation, which is obviously something that would be a priority for any national leader. They, in many cases, they are big. What's known as CSR, corporate social responsibility donors to these countries, especially the developing countries. You know, you have your issues. You always have your issues in certain instances, whether there are environmental tragedies that occur, or you know, some other unfortunate circumstance or bad decision. But by and large, U.S. companies are extremely welcome in all the countries that, I mean, again, now that I have the whole globe, I can't think of a country that, doesn't welcome U.S. investment and participation. And again, they see the alternatives. So, I think it looks better and better. In terms of our overall global relationships, as you've heard the president say, as you've heard his, senior staff, foreign policy staff, all express, it's been important to them to reach out to their counterparts, many of whom they had known prior to the last 4 years, to reestablish connections and to make sure that we're those like-minded countries who believe in democracy, who believe in open markets, who believe in our ability, as a human society to do better, create, better lives for our children. That's the narrative that is going on right now. And I think it's very welcome. That the feedback that I've certainly received from my foreign counterparts has been very, very positive. And I think that what they're seeing with regard to the priorities that the Biden-Harris administration have put on returning to, the Paris Agreement, that climate is, a high priority. A lot of that. Where it's very interesting right now, and as we're all reading, is with regard to the global health crisis and how the U.S. can be, a helpful partner as these developing countries who don't have access to vaccines can be assisted. And so there's a lot of diplomacy going on in that area right now, not always visible, that is extremely important in terms of making sure that our friends and allies know that, we're there not just as a protector, as a member of NATO or as the world's largest military, security operation, but there from a humanity standpoint as well. Very, very important. People to people.
Glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of quickies and we'll begin to wind down here. Best piece of personal advice you ever received about these jobs?
I honestly think it's that you have to, I say this all the time when I'm asked by groups, you have to be able to forgive. You have to continue your passion. You have to continue your energy. You have to continue to hold your beliefs, core beliefs close. But you also have to be able to forgive. You're not going to win every time. You're not going to always hear the nicest things said to you. And the key is to brush it off as quickly as you possibly can, move on, and keep your eyes on the prize. I'm going to give a shout out to my sister again, Holly. Our parents, but really, our parents just instilled this optimistic belief that we could get things done, that that we can, again, that we have a strong forgiveness a strong forgiveness streak. And I really think that that's the secret to success, is you have to move on. You move on, and you continue to look for, where's the next win? How do I get to my goal, even if it wasn't the perfect trajectory that I had originally planned. So I think that's what I have to say. But Holly and I are blessed, along with my brothers, to have had amazing parents who just instilled extraordinary values by their example, that just really made a difference.
And America has to work by its example, or teach by its example.
It does. Yep. And we're not perfect, but we're working toward a more perfect union.
Somebody wrote those words.
I think I saw them on the back of a piece of currency.
They may even be on a statue somewhere. Most satisfying accomplishment?
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. So here's the funny thing. It's going to sound real strange. I mean, I'm really proud. We've stood up a diversity and inclusion council this year within the International Trade Administration. I'm really honored to be co-chairing what's known as the Departmental Management Council, along with the Deputy Secretary, so that I have the opportunity for the broader view of the Commerce Department, not just my bureau. All of those things are very gratifying. But the really cool accomplishment is that as part of what's known as the Indo-Pacific strategy, which is, again, in response to the market opportunities in the Indo-Pacific, but also the security concerns, that I was able to receive funding from Congress in this year's budget to hire some local staff in the Pacific Islands. These are tiny little islands, Fiji, Vanuatu. I mean, these are tiny places. But our biggest adversary has a toehold in those islands from a security standpoint that's very concerning. By our hiring commercial specialists to help those small micro companies to be successful and economically independent, is really the key to building success upon success. And I never thought I would ever get anybody interested on Capitol Hill in this little project. And what was a $400,000 project this year is now going to be a $10 million project. And $10 million in the Pacific Island goes a long way. Is now going to be, and I got to tell you, it was just one of those ideas that came into play, and it worked. And so I've got to say that I just, with a grin, I just have to say, it wasn't the biggest deal that we ever did. It wasn't the most dramatic thing that I've seen, happen or had a part in. But boy, I got to tell you, it feels really good to think that there are going to be people out on those tiny little islands who are going to be helping those populations, and it'll make a difference. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
No, it's not. It's wonderful. And that's a legacy. That
it's really fun.
administration, whatever.
Exactly.
Any one frustration that kind of eats at you a little bit?
Oh, the bureaucracy. I mean,
Never
it's just,
goes away.
it never goes away. It's never going to go away. I mean, that's the part but you learn to live with it and you work around it. That's kind of how it all shakes out.
Do you still find face-to-face meetings the best way to communicate and get things done?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jack. So, we found that we're doing really, really well on a virtual basis, better than anybody ever expected that we could have. That said, everybody is looking forward to seeing people again. And on the international side, it really makes a difference, these relationships that you develop over time with your foreign counterparts. The inability to travel right now it's hard. So I had to do I did a video call for a program we were doing in Saudi Arabia. And the next morning I had to do it with the Emirates. And I was happy to do it. But, I thought to myself, boy, I really wish they could have come to Washington, or I wish that, we could have gone to Riyadh or to Dubai, because there's just no substitute. This is the longest I've gone not traveling to Asia. In probably 15 years, or anywhere. I haven't been on a train or a plane since a year ago, March. So there's going to be a hybrid. We're going to do more, I think, remotely, but the face-to-face diplomatic interactions, they'll be much better once we can do them in person. Very definitely.
Number of languages you can say hello and thank you in.
That's a great question. Not that many. I certainly know Indian, of course, Hindu, Chinese, Portuguese because of Brazil. Yeah, I know it's true. Shay. I'm just trying to think. Probably about 10 or so. Ni hao, of course. You know what it is, though? Everybody speaks English. I mean, it's uncanny.
Thank God.
And what's really funny is when you're with a foreign counterpart, and they choose to speak in their native language, but they understand English and they speak English flawlessly, but they need to do it to make sure that they have a legal record as part of their, diplomatic requirements. But it's always funny because they'll be speaking to you in like Korean. I don't know Korean. And, I'll be listening and watching for facial expressions, and then I'll speak and I can see that they know exactly what I'm saying.
Sure.
So no need for a translator for them, but, we need a translator. So it just goes with the territory.
Okay. Last question. Any message for our younger kids in America about joining the foreign service, government service, how to do it, what to look forward to, how to get your foot in the water?
Well, I'll start by saying we've been doing a lot of hiring, and I don't think I could get a job. I'm telling you now, the people that we're hiring now, they all have advanced degrees from, every imaginable school that you can think of, because we have people overseas. I have 80 plus offices, around the world, in addition to the 106 offices that we have across the United States. They're incredible. I just did a brown bag with our interns last week, and it was wonderful. But I was humbled by their academic credentials. It's a fascinating world out there, and Americans can be very, very comfortable at home. It's okay. But boy, I got to tell you, one of the greatest things that has happened to me because of my international experience is having a far greater sense of what the planet is really like, what our fellow global citizens, who they are and what they're really like. And I think for kids, it is already a global world in so many ways for them. And I think that will continue. But boy, I'll tell you, it's tremendously gratifying to be in the foreign services, no question about it. And you will be with some of the most intellectually interesting people you'll ever meet in your life. Really, really smart people. So that's my advice.
How would a college student apply to be an intern? Is there a place you write to or email?
You can go to the Commerce Department website and do that. Absolutely.
Commerce.gov or something.
Just go to commerce.gov and then just type in internships. And right now is a good time, actually. Now the internships, of course, are going to be virtual, unfortunately, right, because of COVID. And that's, all these interns that I spoke with last Friday, we're talking about the fact that, they loved it. And again, they're already on the international track. Although one of them said she was an athlete. She was going to be doing not recreational science, but it wasn't medicine, but she was going to be doing sports, marketing or something.
Okay.
Yeah, and after 2 years, she decided she wanted to go into international relations, which I thought was fascinating. And a lot of it was the exposure that she'd had as a competitive athlete.
Because they athletic or international language.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So, but go to the department's website, and people can always get in touch with me. I'll make sure that Holly's got my. Absolutely. Holly's got my contact information. People can always get in touch with me, and I will happily put them in with the right person. It's daunting to go onto some of these government websites, not going to lie, especially if you're, a kid.
Yes.
But again, they're so much better, with this stuff than we are as grown-ups anyway. I'm sure they'll navigate it just fine.
All you listeners, Miss Holly Betts is at the Senior Center, and she's Dianne's sister, and she'll be happy to now be your private secretary in Westport. Sorry about that. In closing, Dianne, anything that I didn't ask you that we didn't get to talk about that you'd like to?
No, I think you did a really good job. I'm glancing at these questions that you guys had sent to me, and I think you got it all. I mean, if there's one thing I was going to say, it's just simply, I'm so glad that I come from Westport. I tell people all the time that I'm from Westport. They are fascinated to know that I had, work in municipal government, but they all know Westport. I can't begin to tell you around the world, the people that know Westport, Connecticut. So I wear it as a badge of courage. I'm so glad that Wynn and I are still nearby. We're in Easton. We sold the Westport house once our girls got big and moved out. And we're in Easton now until we get through this crazy pandemic business and out of maximum telework. But at every possible opportunity, I talk about the fact that I'm from Westport, Connecticut. So I just want to send my love to everybody. Thank them for helping to shape me into the adult person that I've become. And I just send my love and best wishes. And I sincerely wish everyone good health right now.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Tell Wynn I'm lobbying for a Grateful Dead concert at the Levitt this summer.
I will tell him. Oh my gosh, he'll go crazy, Jack.
And we'll get together maybe in person or 6 feet apart. Anyway, thank you so much.
You'll be the two guys wearing the Brooks Brothers blazers.
The bandana and the T-shirt, right?
With the tie-dye T-shirt underneath.
Gotta have it. Well, thanks so much for your
Wonderful.
time. Great to see you.
A pleasure.
Stay safe yourself. Say hi to the family. And until next time, thanks.
All righty. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.